Hi, it's Trent Clark. Welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, CEO of Leadershipity, three-time MLB coach, longtime serial entrepreneur, international speaker, and I am today with my special guest, Finnian Kelly. Finn, what's up, buddy?
I'm just happy to be here, Trent, and looking forward to having a really in-depth discussion about leadership and overcoming some challenges.
Yeah. Me too, man. I am so excited. Finn has got a great background. As you can hear, you may have heard, he's got a little accent, right? Finn is an Australian. So I'm excited to dive into that a little bit here, being in the States. He is in Colorado, the lovely state of Colorado, and probably never leaving again. I notice a lot of you Australians go right to Colorado and never go. It's pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful, and I like living between the two locations, and I'm very lucky to see the world really as home. But
Yeah.
Colorado
How
is
often do
definitely
you get
special.
home?
Well, I haven't for a while, just because of what's been happening with the pandemic. But normally, a couple of months each year.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, before I introduce to Finn and all his background, which is glorious and mighty and awesome, let's talk about, for our listener, this show, Winners Find a Way. Have you ever faced stiff adversity, felt like the losses are mounting and you need to find a better way? Well, I think you came to the right place. We always talk to one percenters about their trials, about their tribulations, about their walk and their journey to being elite. And so if you are already an entrepreneur, athlete, business leader, or just looking to start your journey to being excellent, this is the place. So I am thrilled to have Finn here today. And so let's talk about Finn. Tell them where they can find you first on social media, all that stuff. If they want to look up Finn Kelly, where are they going to get you?
Yeah, so my best place is my website, finniankelly.com. That will have everything, and there's a really great free resource about intentionality, how to start living a life with intentionality. And then you'll get onto my social media, which is the Finnian Kelly.
Yes, and we can see that like in your tag, Intentionality Inc., right? We're going to get into that a little bit. So you're the CEO of Intentionality Inc. And then, of course, you have a long storied history in the Australian Defence Force, in the military in Australia, of over 7 years as an officer. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, of course, you did a cool little thing for National Geographic, a documentary on undercover angels. We're going to talk a little bit about that because that just sounds awesome. Then you've already built 2 multi-million-dollar companies in the financial industry, right? Wealth, and then wealth education and financial education, which is I love education. So we're right in that spot. You were the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization in Colorado, which is a fabulous organization of over 15,000 entrepreneurs worldwide, running businesses over $1 million in top line revenue. And the Colorado chapter is a fabulous one. So that must have been a hoot. We're going to talk about that. And then you've also done the trek of the Camino de Santiago, which is the trek across both it's Spain and Italy, right? Or is it France?
It starts in France and then goes all the way across Spain.
All the way across. So it starts in France all the way across Spain. Love it. All right. Hey, a lot of things right there, Finn. A lot of things, like all sorts of stuff to jump into right there. And the first thing that probably comes to my mind, right, is you run Intentionality Inc., which I think is a great name. And you have multiple financial science, chemistry degreed in a very finite, but a lot of people think like, man, Finnian is like the emotional spiritual guru, right? And like, man, that's like no match for me, right? Like you see like gaps, because when I meet financial gurus, they're usually, buttoned up. It's shirt and tie, right? And it's very different than thinking spiritual guru. Is that fair?
It is. And I discovered that really early in my financial experience, where you could map out the perfect investment strategy, have all the numbers lined up, and then you would work with them. And then a year later, you'd come back and it's like, why isn't this working? Because you weren't taking in the human element, the emotional part. And that's where I realized pretty early on that science and math are often like lagging, and we have this intuitive knowledge, but sometimes we go too far to the analytical left side thinking brain and we miss out on this right side feeling brain. So it's really important connecting the both, and that's where I'm very focused, is like connecting the both and becoming an integrated person.
Yeah, I think, by the way, with this pandemic going on, I think now we're accepting that science is lagging, right? Like it's not quick to have all answers, right? It's not perfect. And I'm a science guy too. I have a bachelor's of science, right, in physical and health education.
Mhm.
So I appreciate the human body was primary my science study. And it's not exact, right? There's just so many elements that we want to find, quote unquote, the right answers.
Mhm.
Um, but it's always a continuous search. I think the answers are somewhat moving, if that's fair.
It is, and often what we do is we hand over our own responsibility or agency, self-agency to make decisions. Like often we know whether we're sick or we're not sick, but we'll go to other people to trust their opinion rather than just like checking in and going like, how do we actually feel? Is this
Yeah.
right for me? And that's what I really want people to lean back into more is stop looking outward for an answer and actually just trust your own instincts because there's an incredible intelligent source with your heart, which actually then communicates to the brain, which is sort of like intuitive to the science and works back down to the heart. And most of the time, you'll get the right answer by asking an internal question.
Mm, that's good. Let's pivot here a little bit on you've done all these things in your lifetime. It's pretty awesome. I mean, growing up in Australia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Was there a time like you just said, "Hey, listen, man, like, mom, I'm 10 and I'm ready to be a part of the adventure club and like I need out, like, and I'm going and you can't stop me?" Or was there a point or a thing that happened in your life that said, "This is who I want to be"?
It's quite funny you actually say 10 because 10 was where I transitioned into being an adult. I had an event which was traumatic to me with my family. And at that moment, I suddenly lost the trust of my parents' guidance. And in that moment, I went, well, I have to look after myself. And that really created a lifestyle or a desire to go, well, I've got to get out. I've got to keep searching, keep
Mm,
seeking to create that lifestyle. And that's where it really happened. And there was an innate part of me as well. From a young age, I was always just wanting to play and adventure, and I was jumping off roofs and I was doing crazy things,
yeah.
taking risks. But it was definitely a moment. I think most people will have that. They'll look back in their life and there was like a defining moment, which was trauma for them, and it really set off a course of events. Now, that course of events was brilliant for me for a long time until it wasn't, because the programming that I was operating on was really based off fear. It was a place that I felt
Mm,
like I was going to be abandoned, that I wasn't enough, and I wasn't going to get taken care of. So that drove me to have the finishing school young, being an army officer, being an entrepreneur young, winning all these awards, being financially independent. And on the way, a lot of people are celebrating you. They're actually saying, "Wow, you're amazing. You're doing all these things." And then one day you wake up, which happened to myself later in my life, where suddenly I was just not fulfilled. The hole just got bigger. And then I had to really face everything and rewire the subconscious program that I had been running off for the last 20 years.
yeah, I get into this, anyone who's done a little bit of counseling, right? We dive into this like, hey, there's some gaps there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I could say like, hey, my wife and I, we met very young, right? And we have had to reprogram our arguing, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
I think at one point we got stuck like, hey, we're gonna argue like 16-year-olds, like, you know what? I don't like you anymore. And I just wrote you a note, like, like, wait, what? Like, and it was still happening into our 30s, right? And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
we're stuck and we got to reprogram this maturity level of how we might interact. And you'd think that especially two people that we'd grow out of it. But I think part of it enables us to stay in it when we're around that, right?
It does. And we regress. And a lot of people go, I don't understand this person. Why are they acting that way? And I'm like, well, it's because you're looking at them in adult eyes. They're actually
Yeah.
being a little child right now. Like that's exactly
Yeah.
that. They're not an adult. So it doesn't make sense. And that's part of our journey, is to realize that a lot of the time we're projecting our own woundedness, our own trauma onto other people. And unfortunately, relationships is where we do it the most. It's because you want to feel seen, and you initially feel like that person saves you and you understands you completely, until you don't. And then you're like, something's wrong with the relationship. But it's nothing's wrong with a relationship. That's something I say regularly. There's nothing wrong with our relationship. There's something wrong with us. And
Yeah.
that's what we can work through.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think it's interesting when you say something's wrong with us. There's ownership in that, right? And
Hmm.
I don't think I think the majority of people go, there's definitely something wrong with you, like, because I don't want it to be me, right?
Hmm.
And that's tough because we do end up challenged in this environment, and probably like you said, anything that's probably traumatic, anything that's probably big, involves some level of a severed relationship, right?
Hmm.
And so that stays with us. And of course, anytime that happens, there's always this, well, I'm going to start moving to what I get to control, who I choose into my life, because this will never happen to me again. Even if we're not saying it physically, it's definitely unconsciously there, right?
It is. And we try to put up these whole protection barriers, and we think the
Oh,
more we
yeah.
can control, then this can't happen to me. But you can't control anything in this universe. Like, it's
Yeah.
all impermanent, it's all a mystery, it's all magical, and eventually it'll always come falling down. And then when you've created this like controlled barrier, the drop, like the confrontingness of that is just so much heavier. And that's
Yeah.
why we've just got to start just going with the flow a little bit, follow the Tao Te Ching, all in the sort of the middle and the way. And like, I was reading a great verse of the Tao Te Ching today, which is the 48th verse, and it's all about adding through subtracting. This idea that we've been conditioned that more is better,
Yeah.
that the more we have, the more success, all these different things, the more that we are worthy. But it's actually not. It's about getting less and dropping them away and realizing that you're always going to be provided for, and there's a magic just in the universe to connect with.
Yeah, it's funny. It feels almost like biblical to me, like that we've been doing this is human nature from the beginning. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let's get the city. We'll build up 30-foot walls. We'll put security. No one will ever come into Jericho, man. Like, you know what? These walls are gonna fall. Like, I'm
Oh
just
yeah,
telling you, someone is gonna come down and bring them down. And we think it's going to work. So it's
yeah.
funny, but we're doing it. We're doing it physically. We're doing it emotionally. We're doing it spiritually. We're doing it all sorts of different ways.
Oh yeah, and in the financial space, that's something I saw all the time. A
Mm.
lot of people would come in there, they're like, my number one goal is security and safety. And what was always interesting is they would have
Put
a
it all
number,
on Google.
and yeah, and then they would get there, and what would happen? They would actually suddenly two things would happen. They would either suddenly say, well, that's not safe enough for me now, it's not secure, I need more, or they
Yeah.
would go into this fear factor. Well, now I've got the security, I've got to protect it, and then they put up these walls around them. So this whole idea that if you are going after security, it actually breeds insecurity. So,
Ooh.
like, thinking about that and going, well, why is it that you want that so much? Is it you don't feel like you don't trust the universe, you don't trust yourself, and that's why we've got to get into the psychological element at all times.
Well, I mean, one of the things I assumed that part of this trauma as a young age. I mean, you took some risks as a kid. It sounded like you were, trying out for Jackass the movie early, right?
Yeah.
Like, and trying to, test some. You risked some things, and nothing really horrible happened, right? Like, so it gave you strength in risking more. Is that fair?
It is true. I have a great relationship with risk now, and I think about it a lot. Where if you actually look at what happens in life, if you take big enough risks, like nothing ever really ends up happening. Like even the people who've had the biggest failures in life, because they were so big, they ended up becoming famous and were able to leverage off that story. So in a
Yeah.
weird way, the greatest risk of all is not taking any risk. I used to say that with investment strategies. Like if you don't take risk, you're going to go broke safely. Like that's what you're going to
Yeah.
do. Like if you just put money in cash, and you're just going to go really broke safely over time, especially in an inflationary world right now. So it's in your best interest to take risk. Like the universe supports you. And even in my time where I lost everything and I lost my life, sort of broke down, I look back at it and I was like, the life was pretty good still. Like, yes,
Yeah.
there was my version of it was pretty challenging, but I look back, it wasn't like I was dying or like starving. Like there was a lot of people who were in a lot worse situation to me, but it was my comparison of where I was, which was actually causing me the biggest pain. My life in that present moment was better than it was 5 years ago, but it was the comparison that I'd lost so much that's made me suffer.
Yeah, I tell you, I love that, because I love the quote, like, and I forget the author who said it. I spent 90% of my life worrying about things that never happened,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
Yeah. I think
And
it was Mark Twain.
It's Twain. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So, and I mean, just like, wow, like as I think about that, like, man, if I did an inventory of the 20 things I was worried about yesterday, they're not even concerns for me today, right? Like, and by the way, 19 of them didn't happen, right? So it's
Mhm.
like, wait, what am I doing, right? And so that's pretty cool, man. It's pretty awesome. So let's flip the switch a little bit here on this. I want to talk a little bit about um the winners find a way, right?
Mm.
I like the quote, winners when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win. If you know my background, Phineas, or yeah, Finian, I am a pro baseball guy,
Mhm.
right? I competed from the time I was, baby, right? A kid, like first grade, right through. And then I really just did this hardline audit of excellence from the time I was like grade 9, like 13, 14 years old until I was like literally 30. It was every year was, how do you find excellence as a team? How do you keep going? How do we win championships? How do we come together? What missed? And then breaking all that down every time when you miss, right? And so what I found with great leaders is that they do face adversity, they do face challenge, and there's a lot of concepts of what people will do in that, but the greatest always overcome, right?
Mhm.
Can you take us back to a time where were kind of up against it, felt like, hey, this was dire, not a way out. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it. You kind of mentioned earlier, like, hey, we start that negative self-talk, I'm not enough. I'm not doing, I'm never going to make it. This isn't going to work. All those things. Can you take us back to a time?
For sure. So nearly 5 years ago, I got hit with a perfect storm. I had sold my second company. We were financially independent. We'd moved to Colorado, skiing every day, living in a mansion. Life was really good. And then a few things just started happening. We got into a legal battle over the company we sold because they never had an intention to pay us the money. We then got into a legal battle with my partner's dad's estate, with their business partners who was trying to not really recognize the value of the business. So it was a double legal battle. Plus, we had started a new company and I'd raised a bunch of money and I was just feeling super burnt out because emotionally I was affected from my partner's dad dying and the strength that had on our relationship. So we had this weight of money loss, legal battle, shame over shutting down a business, and it all happened at once. And then my wife and I actually separated at that time. So I'm sitting there completely by myself, just in so much shame, just completely devastated, just confused what had happened. I was living a life with intentionality and still all of this happened. And I was pretty low. And in that time, I went back to first principles. I just focused on what do I need to do to get through the day. And I had this list of 16 activities which I knew increased my serotonin and oxytocin and helped me feel a little bit better. And I started tracking and I went, if I do 5 of them, I'll get through the day. If I do 10, I generally feel okay and I'll want to wake up the next day. And I just started doing that. And I went really deep into positive psychology and just went, well, I'm my greatest asset. Yes, I've lost all these other assets, but how do I get myself to be in a flourishing state again? And that's really how I focused on it. And I didn't distract myself and just went in daily, ticking off this list. And it seemed super basic, but that's, I think, what you've got to do sometimes. Imagine at some point your form went out and you had to go back to first principles and learn how to swing again or catch again in some way. And it was super humbling, super challenging, because I was like, what am I doing? Why am I here again? After all the success I've had, how am I doing this? But that's how I worked through it. And then I started going, well, how do I want to vision my life again? And how do I sort of acknowledge the past I've had, understand you can never get a clean slate, but you can build on it in a way. And then I just started focusing on my craft and just focused on speaking and facilitating and coaching. And now I'm so much happier where my life has ended up because it's gone down another pathway.
I just think it's, first of all, I love the put one foot in front of the other, right? Like tomorrow, like, hey, I love that you got a 19, right? You build yourself out a list and say, hey, this is, and that science helps, right? Because you're thinking, hey, I need some oxytocin, like I need some serotonin, right? I need some vitamin D, right? I need some, stimulation to my blood and my skin. Like that's very important, all these things. And so, Yeah, it's very, and by the way, that's very fundamental. This is not crazy stuff. This is living 101, right? And we don't talk about it because we've always done these things, but now we got to go back to the basics, like literally you put your right leg, pant leg in first. I'm gonna put my left second,
Hmm.
like, and I'm gonna get these pants on. We're gonna go do something, right?
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, and you're exactly right. It happens in baseball. It happens in sport. You fall into a slump, right? And meanwhile, by the way, I think this is one of the big psychology challenges. And let's talk a little bit about this is when these things happen, in the major leagues, in a guy who just sold his company for millions and lives in a mansion, like, hey, buddy, how could you be unhappy? Look what you have. Like,
Hmm.
the outside perspective of human nature says, you've got everything I ever wanted. What's your complaint, man? Is that fair?
It is. I'm actually reading Will Smith's autobiography right now, which I highly recommend. And it goes through his journey where he just thought the answer was, well, if I have more money, more women, more fame, then I'm going to feel better. And then once
Yeah.
he got it, it was just the hole was even bigger. And then he's rather than acknowledging that perhaps something was wrong with him, he just thought the answer was more. He just needed to have more
Yeah.
and more again. So it's that acknowledgement. I spoke about trust before. And in these times, you've got to be very careful about what you trust. We can't trust the head, the stories, because there's a program going on there which is affecting you. So trusting the story could get you down a wrong path. You might start thinking you are bad or something's wrong. And it's not. That's just a false story. So we need to get into our hearts. And that's where we trust, because that's a higher wisdom. That's a higher intelligence. And then we can start opening up and start realizing, okay, life isn't so bad. And maybe I just have some chemical imbalances. That's what I do like science. It's just maybe
Yeah.
it's just something's a little bit off with you and you just need to tinker it a little bit. And there's ways to really easily do that.
Yeah, I think I learned that as a later adult, right? Obviously we're doing performance psychology in sports,
Hmm.
but we're also doing, physical performance, right? Evaluation. And, I learned that I could never I could never outwork out a bad diet, right?
Mm.
So if I was putting poor chemicals, things into my body and then going, man, I want to go great. Like, I really want to go fast and go hard. And, I always equated it to a Porsche, right?
Hmm.
We're going to have this Porsche and we're never going to change the oil. We're going to put low octane fuel and some ethanol in there. And then, a year later, we're like going, man, this thing doesn't really go 0 to 60 like it used to. Like, yeah, right. Like,
Hmm.
and you've got a mechanic who's never worked on a Porsche jacking it up. And you're like, man, we've got to take care of this ultra human body, right? And the human body, by the way, I love this statistic, and you'll appreciate this from a science guy. If we were to create the human body again, right, the human body would be valued at $500 million.
It's
If we
amazing, isn't it?
recreated it from the materials that we have available to us and we had to recreate, it would be a five. I mean, listen, you could buy any jet in the world for that, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's not a jet you can't buy. There's not any technology. And then I think, like, who in the world is charged as the CEO and responsible for a $500 million asset? Whoa, that's a
It's
big responsibility. And here, in the business world, we give big money to the person. Like, we're going to give you our $500 million asset to run. We're going to pay you millions probably to do it and take care of the baby, right? Like,
yep.
and we are all charged with this in our own human body. And we're like, yeah, hey, whatever. I'm just going to smoke. I'll feel fine. I'll do whatever I want. You're like, well, you know what? It's not going to work the way you think it's going to work. Spiritually, emotionally, physically, all the nutrition side, it's huge.
It is. And what's interesting is people are starting to comprehend the physical side. They understand, well, what I put into it is going to create an output. But then we don't realize our psychological side. It's the same. Like, what are you consuming? What are you putting
Yeah.
into your brain first thing in the day? We've got to be very, very smart about this. And this is why meditation is so important, because it's just like a cleaning out system. It's just like emptying them out of all the crap you've just put into your life.
Yeah. Well, and I think the pandemic has raised awareness around that, right?
Hmm.
Because I think we really, really were, I feel like, coming up on the physical health. I mean, we've been beat on it. Like, I mean, if you're in America and you don't understand physical health, like you don't have, you can look on your phone and get physical health right now, right? Like it'll be like in like 10 minutes, you can have an app that's I'll take you through a workout right now, free probably, if not very cheap, right? And you can get moving and doing some things. This pandemic has definitely raised awareness around that, that psychological factor, that emotional health. And, I like, there's a quote in the Bible that says, guard your heart, for everything else flows from it, right? And it's like, whoa, guard your mouth, because what's in your heart flows from it. So like when you hear, and I think of this all the time, when I hear people talking just trash, bad language, I'm like, ooh, heart's not clean.
Totally right. And that's something where it all comes back to. It's like the fundamental principle of intentionality is experience peace and joy by choosing love over fear. And the way we're communicating, you can directly see, is that person in a love state or in a fear state? And fear is always, it's a low vibrational frequency. So it's always going to do harm to you, where love is high vibrational. So just in the nature of it, like of being self-interest, you should just be in a love state just to look after yourself.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? But so let's talk through this. I believe in fear because there's self-preservation, right? Like, I mean, we should be aware and knowledge of that, but living in that daily, if I'm that person, right? And I think I was that person, by the way, Finn. I mean, I think I was fear driven, much like yourself. Yeah. I was have more, be more. I don't want to choose, failure's not an option, but fear drove me in a lot of ways. And I didn't, I could search all the walls. I couldn't find the switch to turn it off. Is that fair?
It is. It's because we're not conditioned, like we're not born in a place where we're in fear. We're conditioned into a place of fear. Think of the language that people around us. Don't do that. Be careful. Oh, that's going to cause you problems. It's like programmed into us from a young age, and that's programmed in from their parents. So we need to be very mindful that this is harming us. And there's now direct science. This is where science is actually catching up. They can actually track what's happening when you're in a fear state and in a love state. So if we actually have that awareness that we are not that directly, that's a conditioned program, we then have choice. We have agency to actually get out of it. You have to be willing to give up this story that you need fear. A lot of successful people, and I coach a lot of them, they're worried that if they become more connected to their heart and they become more spiritually open and turn into a more love state, they're going to lose their edge. But that's just a story. That edge has served them in some regard. But imagine if you actually let it go, you're not going to lose your skill set or anything like that. You're actually going to be in a stronger position. And that's what I really try to encourage people, is just test it on a few little areas and see what happens to you. You're not going to lose your edge at all.
I love that. And I think it's a great idea to test it, right? Because I would be reluctant. And I can also be very open and honest about the fact that while fear has served me in a lot of things, it's harmed me in a lot of other relationships, right? So I could take the good, but hey, I'm on also accept the bad, right? And that's why I feel like in our society right now, we don't want that, right? We want, well, I only accept it one way. Like, hey, it's not a one-way street here. Like, it's going to go both ways for you, right? Your superpower strength is going to turn into a negative at some point, right? And vice versa, where, hey, I've got this weakness, but maybe that serves me in another way. Because if I didn't have this weakness, I would have never hired Finn. And now look how much stronger our organization is, because I brought in someone to lean into my weakness.
And a lot of times, this is the problem with comparison. We compare against someone, but we only compare against one element of their life, the one variable. And I'm like, okay, you can be that person, you can have that, but then you have to also have the horrible relationship, the problems with the health. Like, you have to actually take those things as well. And that's something where I'd love to just see, or would you take that if you actually knew all the elements of their life?
Hey, I want to ask you a science question about this emotional health. What do you think of the new Aura ring, where people are like monitoring sleep patterns, steps, their mental health? Am I getting this stuff? What do you think of it?
So I'm now actually against them. I've seen what's happened to a lot of people, and what they're doing, it turns into a comparison mechanism. They're comparing what they should be or comparing against their friends, which then puts them into a place of lack, which is a low vibration. They're also losing their own self-agency of decision. Like I had one for a while, and I thought I'd have a great sleep, and then I'd see, oh no, you didn't have a good sleep. And then suddenly my mind, my mental attitude would change, and I'd get grumpy and irritable, even though I probably felt fine. I probably could have done everything that day. So
Yeah.
we're handing over our decision making to data, and a lot of people, I get it for really high performing sports people where there's like they're trying to get that edge, but most people aren't doing that. They're just tracking it for the sake of it, and then they actually feel not great. And that's where I think you got to be very careful with them.
I think that's legitimate right there. I had this conversation yesterday, right? And it's like, hey, I feel fine. Oh no, my aura says I didn't sleep good. Ugh, I'm grumpy and now I'm exhausted. Like, wait a minute. Now my day's going to be an exhaustion and I probably need a nap. Like, do you usually take naps? Like,
Yeah.
well, no, but the aura says I didn't sleep well. I don't know. I'm on, but I see this in science too. I would say the other one that's very prevalent right now is, hey, I got my vaccine and then I got COVID. And my COVID only lasted 12 days. You're a healthy guy and you don't have the vaccine and your COVID only lasted 3 days. Like, it's affecting people differently. But the narrative is, hey, I didn't die because I had the shot, which there's no data yet to show it, right? We just don't know yet. But we're telling ourselves things like, oh, well, I think this is working. Like, I don't know.
And the problem with data is it's averages. Like that's what it really is. It's
Yeah.
averages. And if I don't associate myself as average, so
Mm.
why would I be using myself against average data? I don't want to be comparing myself against that. Like a lot of the medical stuff, I'm like, why do we want to be average? We look at the average person in this world. Like most people are pretty obese. So why would you want to be comparing yourself to those numbers? No, you want to be going against the top athletes and the healthy people. So that's
Yeah.
just another problem with data.
There is another, I mean, and it's funny with data and you going through science, going through school. I'm sure because of your science background, you did lab work,
Yeah.
right? And it's amazing. Like, anyone who's ever actually done lab work goes, well, what do you want it to say? Like, because
Mm-hmm.
I can set the test up to say what you wanted to say. Like, so when I hear people go, oh, hey, here's the lab test on that, I'm like, who financed it? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Gatorade. Oh, I bet everybody got hydration out of this, didn't they?
Yeah.
We already know we're going to set this thing up to be successful because what? The product needs to show it has value, right?
And we also need to look back in the life. How many times were we so certain about something and then later on it was proven?
Right.
So like flat Earth to round Earth, Newtonian physics to quantum physics. So the problem in the medical system these days, they're still getting taught on Newtonian physics, which just isn't the way. That's all about cause and effect. You put one thing in and you'll get this action. With quantum physics, we're seeing now, and this is why we're seeing such a rise in epigenetics, is the idea that you can't just go in and just kill one part of the body. It's a complete living organism and it's all connected. And that's where we need to just be open a little bit. And I just say, trust your own instincts. Like trust, there's certain things which work for you, which don't work for others. And I would use that over any data to start with.
Well, we're given this innate ability to kind of know, right? It's a conscience, right? We talk about the
Mm-hmm.
conscience all the time. Like, we're born with a conscience and we know right and wrong. Like, we know it. Like, we may not choose it. Right? And I appreciate that, but we know it. And you can feel it. Like, you feel the hairs on your neck. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, should I try this? Like, and we will make a conscious decision to go against it, which is our human nature. Great. But we do instinctively know, don't we?
We do. And that's something you can really start training yourself. Like actually, like drop into a heart-centered place, breathe in between your heart, and then ask it a question. And it will answer the question before you've even asked it because it's intuitive. It actually knows. And you can start testing these things. And you can do an exercise where you can look back at decisions where you've felt like, oh, you thought it was right, but it was wrong. And you can go back into that place. And I do this with meditative states. And you can see what were you feeling just before it. And generally, all the times where something went wrong, you knew it. There was a little signal on the back of your neck and you overrided it. You used trusted someone else's judgment, like you're in a group think, or you trusted some data against yourself. And every time you're like, oh, why did I do that? And that's what I really want to train people, because we're tapped into one consciousness. This is the way how one person can invent something on one side of the earth, and then instantaneously across the other side of the earth with no communication, someone has also invented that, because it's all come from the same source. And that's how we can use meditation to tap into this higher intelligence, this high wisdom. We all have access to it. We just don't know how to access it. That's our problem.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Have you seen the movie with Brad? What's his name? The guy from The Hangover.
Oh yeah.
You know the movie I'm talking about?
He's incredible. I know exactly who you're talking about.
He gets the pill that can get 80% of his brain.
Yeah, Limitless.
Yeah. What did you think of that movie?
Yeah, I liked it.
I loved it too.
Giving you the concept that there is more. We're operating at such a low level of our potential. And that's where we've just got to learn how to open it up. And a lot of it is about emptying out the programming we've had from a very young age, and then see what is actually there.
Have you heard the book, You Can't Hurt Me? Have you listened to it?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, he's a guy who also pushes the psychological performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's thinking brain over it all, right?
Yeah, and that's what we learned in the military. Like, there's so many things. That's something which has served me so well. There's so many things where if you put it on paper, there was just like no chance. There's no way you can do this. But someone else shows you, or you do it, and you're just like, all right, I can do this. And then that gives you a little confidence that, well, what else am I saying no to that actually is possible?
Love it. Let's jump into the question of let's come back to this for a second, which is, if you had to tell somebody else that, you know, they were in that moment that you were in 5 years ago, feeling that way, feeling down, feeling empty, feeling like, hey, nothing's gone right. I can't believe all this is snowballed into one, you know, great event, right? It's perfect storm, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell them to do? What do you think the actions, values, beliefs you'd be educating them on to take those first steps?
So one is, I always ask the question now, how is this serving me? Like, there's a reason why this is happening. And if you look at life, there's always a gift on the other side of everything. And you just look back at your life and you always go, well, my greatest like growth was actually through my most traumatic experiences. So in a weird way, we should relish challenges, because there's always growth and there's always opportunity on the other side. So that's definitely one. I would look at it and go, well, what faulty programming have I got running? Because you only get yourself into these instances if we've got faulty programming. It's not that you're bad or you're not capable. You just have a faulty program which has reached its limit. So this is a chance to break that down and then rewire it. And then I always like the quote from Martin Luther King that only in the darkness can you see the stars. So that's just a reminder that
only the what?
Only in the darkness can you see the stars. So it's just a reminder that it may look really dark right now, but that's also where you get the greatest like beauty as well.
I love that. It's a good quote. Yeah, I think that it's so valued that we never think about our programming's off, right? Like that probably never enters someone's mind. The serving concept is just because typically when we get into a bad place, I would say, well, I'll just say personally, I'm not gonna call anybody else out here, but I would say personally, when I am in a bad place, 9 times out of 10, pride led me there. Right? So there's some level of like, hey, I was making decisions. I know the way. I, me, not choosing to listen, didn't bring the right people in, didn't take the patience to get information, whatever it was, right? And if I circled back on the biggest challenges in my life, I would say pride is a big one, right? So, man, pride never serves, right? Like, it never. So it's like, whoa, what am I thinking? Like, this is not going to ever work. The other thing that you touched on that I just love, by the way, and I say this all the time and people flip out, like, I love conflict. Like, I love it. Like, listen, nothing ever got better in the world without some challenge, right? Without something that just stopped us and we went, oh crap, this is as far as we can go. Is it? Like, hold on, let's see if we can actually go further in another way. Like, and there's all these things. So that ability, it has always been, the moment there's conflict, challenge, disagreement, we all just, like, it's like the clouds opened up and improvement's possible if you're ready. Are you ready for improvement? Are you ready to do something different? Let's listen into everybody and actually come away from this on a rocket ship getting better. Or we can all just act like fools, go into our childhood mode, throw fits, well, throw myself down on the floor, throw bad words at people, stomp my feet, whatever. And we're still doing this as adults, right? In business today, and you've seen it probably as a coach.
Oh yeah.
Where you got a 50-year-old going, are you serious right now? Like just airing people out and everything else. You're like going, there is no way that is ever going to have any effectiveness to get over this challenge.
We're seeing that with a lot of our leaders in the world right
Ugh.
now. You see them as grown men. I'm like, no, they're just wounded little boys acting out right now. And that's where we need to rise up and actually start putting some supporting the feminine, really, because the wounded little men have caused a lot of problems in this life, and now it's time to, like, all right, let's get back to nurturing in nature and love and supporting ways.
Yeah, isn't it? It's amazing when, probably about 15, 20 years ago, really emotional intelligence took a big jump, right? A lot of focus in it, based on the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then about probably, I'd say 10, 12 years ago, it really leaked itself into that corporate leader. And so it's amazing when you see the lack of emotional intelligence in world leaders, right? It's like, wait, do you have any kind of control of what you say, do, act, how you respond to people? Like, there is so much done that many people, like, would be fired out of your or my business within a month.
Yeah. And I would actually say they don't have control. They're running on a reactionary program rather than being in a responsive mode. And that's one of the key elements, like a key behavior intentionality, is respond rather than react. Understand that you do have programs going on. Things are going to get triggered, which is going to set off an automatic reaction. But you have choice. The one bit we do have free agency of is our behavior. We can't control our thoughts. We can't control our feelings, but we can drive those feelings and beliefs and thoughts through our behavior. So in that moment, I'm noticing myself. I'm getting triggered and irritated. Rather than just starting to lash out, we could take a breath, calm down our nervous system, and then go, what's the feeling I want? What do I want to connect with? Well, I want to become closer to my partner. Well, is yelling at them or telling them that they've done something wrong, is that going to bring us more connection? No. What would be? Well, perhaps actually just going, oh, wow, I'm just acting a little bit silly right now, or going in and giving them a hug. Suddenly you get that feeling, that connection, and then that starts chipping away at a new belief. And that's really the work. And that's why I always say you're one breath away from intentionality, because intentionality is literally defining how you want to feel and then doing the behavior that takes you towards that. One breath gives you a chance to respond rather than react.
One breath. I love this. I think we're going to be active, right? We're going to take an active something. Mm-hmm. And even doing nothing is actually an active move, right? Doing nothing is actually intentional activeness of nothingness, right?
I think it's one of the hardest active moves.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So I always ask people, if you're going to be active, are you going to be pro or re? Like, and I don't see organizations or teams do reactive well.
I really like that quote. I might use that. That's a good one.
Yeah, use it, Finny. I love it. Yeah. So let's move a little bit to some of the questions I have from audience here. Okay. I love this one here. You've had a lot of success, won many games, many battles, overcome a lot. What's the best battle that you've ever conquered in your lifetime?
It'd definitely be rewiring my subconscious program from a one of fear to love. That's what I've been on the last 4 years, that journey. And I realize that now I'm in a place where I'm not accountable to sort of anyone else. I'm not reacting to anyone else. I'm just purely responsive to myself. And now the world can be chaos around me, and I know that I'm completely fine. I can just be steady because I can always lean into love. So that's definitely the hardest battle. And it was the most confronting as well, because it really, I had to take acknowledgement that I was causing this. Yes, there were some events in my life that triggered this, but that happened 20 years ago. I was choosing participating in this every day since. And that was the bit where I was like, wow, I have to release this. And I had to do a lot of forgiveness to myself, forgiveness of others. And by far the greatest thing, because now I experience peace and joy. And they are the two highest emotional states under enlightenment. And that's where we really need to be operating within.
Love it. Okay, this one's pretty good, and this is going to kind of take into your coach. You know, you've been deep into this journey, and now let's take a look at others for a minute, because most of us look in the mirror and something's very obvious, but we don't see it in ourselves. What do you see most often that people are missing when they look in that mirror?
I think it's actually not acknowledging the miracle of their life. It goes back to your statement of that our body is worth $500 million.
Right.
Like, if you actually just acknowledge that, suddenly you feel a lot more proud, a lot more connected, a lot more rich in life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, oh, I don't believe in miracles. And I just look at them and I'm like, what about you? Like,
You
the
are one.
act of you becoming into this life, like, so many elements had to happen there. Like, that's just one of millions of miracles. And once you get open to that wonder and that awe of life, suddenly you start seeing all these things and you realize that it is a bit of a playful game, and you can really get out of your current situation by just being open and starting to play with this beautiful wonder of the universe.
Yeah, I think that that's a great example of what I would never think, right? I mean, I'm not trying to be shy on it. I mean, I think that I don't look in the mirror and think, "Oh, miracle," right? Like, look, I was born into this unique environment, yada yada yada, like all the things that have happened in my life and all the even close misses, a lot of near misses, right? And I mean, just continues. I've had 10 miracles in my life that are just absolutely nearly unexplainable.
So one of my challenges in my life is how I respond to injuries. I get really down at myself. It's just something which I've worked on greatly over my life. And we do that a lot. We're always like, I can't believe I injured myself here. But if you actually had a videotape of all the near misses that could have resulted in injuries, like I'm a very intense skier, mountain biker, all these things. Like, there's been multiple times where I've done somersaults and landed on my neck and I think it's over, and then I just walk up and walk off. And so that's part of that miracle. Like, stop focusing on what is wrong with you or what you don't have and realize that there's a lot going for you.
That's so true. I love that. How do you feel like along the way? Here's a good question. How do you feel like you got developed? Did you get developed through the military, the university? What were the things that you were learning along the way that's really served you now that, I always think, like, when I was a coach, right? I worked with all these famous coaches, right? And I'm taking things from Nick Saban and, all these different coaches that I was around. And there was just bunches of people that are now, Hall of Fame type coaches. And I'm taking the best of them because I'm auditing why they're successful as I'm in the middle of it and watching them from, right next to them very closely and seeing how people respond, all these things. So when you look at your development, what kind of influences they had on you along the way?
So one of my assets or skill sets, I think, is I surround myself by incredible people, and I don't look at them in their entirety. I pick out the things that I really want. So I have, like, this, I call them my brains trust around me, and I know who to turn to in certain situations, which has been a great asset. There's been a few moments, like the military, 4 years of the most intense leadership training you could get. And there was just a core couple of principles you could summarize it was. One was just make a decision. That was the most fundamental thing in the military as an army officer, was make a decision, because the biggest thing you could do to stop your your platoon trusting you is to be like in a place of like, I'm not sure what to do. It's better to make a decision, and then as you go in the wrong direction, you suddenly realize, oh, I'm going the wrong direction, and you just fix it and loop back around. So that was incredibly
So the analysis paralysis is the danger.
Yeah, that was incredibly important. Another one was just thinking about like what could actually go wrong, and rather than getting into the fear of it, we never stopped a mission because of what could have gone wrong. We just went, well, when that goes wrong, what's our strategy? Like, how are we going to plan for that? So we used to call them actions on, which was incredible. And then ultimately looking at people who I respected and trying to change the definition of success. I think that this is a big challenge. Is so many people are, you've had all this success, and I'm like, well, have I? Or is that only an accepted definition of success in your world, that you're comparing that growing businesses, making money is success? What about really being in love with yourself, having incredibly quality relationships, being healthy? Like, once we change that definition of success, so that's something I work on a lot personally and with other people, is let's make your definition of success, and that's what you're comparing against.
So good. Love it. Yeah. So let's talk, before we go here, I want to talk a little bit about Intentionality Inc. and talk about how love and prosperity flows into that, how those things come together. Because, I think that I would say probably most people would argue, well, if I'm very intentional, prosperity is going to come. And again, we're back to people's definitions of prosperity, right? Like, that means you got the rich house and you got the big mansion and you got the goods and the stuff, and you can go do what you want. And we're all just defining what success is in our own minds, right?
It is. So what we do with intentionality, we have 4 main pathways, and the main first pathway is the grounding path. And this is all by how you want your life to look like. What is it that you want to feel? Think of it as like a blueprint for success. And we call it the grounding path because it's meant to ground you into what matters to you. Because sometimes in life we get opportunities and it looks great and someone says, oh, this would be perfect for you, but it's not in line with what you really want for your life. And then you suddenly go off your path, and before you know it, you're living a completely different life that you want. So we've got to have that core grounding path. And then we have 3 other pathways, which when we look at most people who go to any self-help group or retreat, they're either looking for 3 things. They're looking for better well-being, better love, or better prosperity. So we have the well-being path, the prosperity path, and the love path. And the idea is it's about, how do you want to feel? You'll notice that we always talk about how do you want to feel, because so often we think a materialistic object or an achievement is going to make us feel a particular way. But if we don't know what it is that we want to feel, perhaps that's not going to lead it to that way. And suddenly we're 5 years down the path and we get that achievement and we're like, oh, this isn't what I wanted.
Yeah.
So we want to get to that really early. And the idea that all pathways lead to intentionality, but you do need to be balanced. If you go too focused on prosperity, there's going to be a consequence with your well-being and love path potentially. So we've got to make sure that they're all coming concurrently along, parallel pathways. And sometimes you can focus on one in particular, but it can't be at the loss of the other. It has to be like, oh, wow, I've got my well-being path really strong now. So now I can focus on prosperity path because I've almost got it on autopilot, but I'll have checks in place to make sure that I'm not going off.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw this. I mean, this is a really cool way to look at it. I saw this in pro athletics, where we would get athletes very focused on their physical well-being, and they would not focus on their mental well-being or their skill sets, which were so important. Or they would just focus on skill sets because everyone says I have to have more skill, and then injury knocks them out because they didn't focus on their health and wellness and prevention, right? So it's we do have to keep all those things working together and move them all up together to have that balance, because one thing drops and it'll cradle the whole thing.
It does, and it's a real problem with the way our human mind works. We think in things in a linear way, and we believe that, well, I'll focus on my prosperity now, and then I'll deal with my love and my well-being. But there's a few things that happen. Like, one, at that time, you're creating new programs which are going to be really hard to unwire later on. So you might think you might be able to do that. Oh, I'll deal with love then. But you've become such a grumpy, irritated, prideful person that you actually can't be open to that love. Or like what happens in life a lot. We think, oh, I'll make all this money and then I'll enjoy it all. A lot of people, their bodies start falling apart. They can't enjoy it. And that's why I think this whole way we've got like work hard now for retirement later, it's a fallacy. It's a trap. Like there's so many people who can't enjoy their life because their body doesn't enable it. So why not just back off a little bit when you're younger? Do you really need to make all this money now? Or could you actually be having multiple sabbaticals and having enough, buy a little bit more time, and trust that you're actually going to work for the rest of your life? Because as most people know, work brings fulfillment if you're actually passionate and doing what matters. So why would you suddenly want to give up something that you've been so attached to for this idea of this fantasy of playing golf for 40 years?
Yeah. I love it, man. Listen, we could talk all day. I'm telling you, all day on this stuff. I love it. So let's kind of close here. First of all, thank you to Finn Kelly for coming on. This has just been awesome. Follow the show on YouTube Live. Many more videos on the Leadershipity YouTube channel. We are on Leadershipity at Instagram, Twitter, Trent M. Clark. And you can find all the socials there. Our website is leadershipity.com. Look for our upcoming book, The Pyramid of Leadershipity, and you can also do a self-assessment there. So you can reach out to me at Trent@Leadershipity and find out a little bit more about my values and accountability as a leader. And then, of course, Finn, tell them where they can find you.
So the best place is FinnianKelly.com or the Finnian Kelly on social media, and you'll go down a pathway and just take use of the free resources we have there.
Love that. Yeah, I'm going to jump on that. If you enjoyed today's episode, please continue listening. Rate us, Winners Find a Way, 5 stars. We work hard to find value delivering stories from the 1% leaders for you each and every episode. Finnian Kelly, of course, did not disappoint. And so let's end, Finnian, with your quote. What's your go-to? Like, hey, if there's a time you talked about 3 great things that we can do. While you're kind of pulling your quote out, I want to talk a quick just synopsis. Talking about dealing with trauma and how we react to that, and having a good and healthy relationship with risk, adding through subtracting, so important. Give up the story that you need fear. I love that. The 3 things when you're down, how does it serve me? Maybe I check your faulty programming, and the famous quote from MLK that you can only see, only in the darkness can you see the stars, which I love that quote, by the way. And then the shift in science, right? As we've had this to quantum physics and how we're discovering there's much more holistic, physical science, mental science, everything on that side, right? On the quantum. So, and then of course, what else do I have? I got a lot of good stuff. All your things that you learned about from your upbringing in your development, right? Make a decision, calculating what could go wrong, and having tools in your adaptability tool belt to actually address those when they do go wrong, and then defining success for you, what that looks. Don't let other people define success for you. I thought that's huge. Give me your quote. What do you go to?
So whenever I'm a little bit lost, what happens is you get into that state where you're thinking about yourself too much, and it just can cause problems. So I love a quote by Gandhi, which is, the best way to find yourself is in the service of others. So whenever I'm in doubt, I just reach out and go, who can I help in that moment? And generally it's a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. You end up feeling better as well, which naturally helps you.
Yeah, I love this. As you've pointed out so deeply here about questioning the direction we're going. I never think there's a wrong, there's no way to serve wrong, right? Always feeling better to give to somebody. I love that quote. I thought about our interview this week, Finnian, and I was thinking, I immediately came to Marshall Goldsmith because of your background and your pivots. What got you here won't get you there. Like, we have to stay open to that. As I'm learning from you, and I learned a lot today. I just hear that and I just think, man, thought of that right away for you. So thankful you could join us today. All excited about having you again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Trent. I loved it.
All right, everyone else, please join us every Friday, 12:30 Eastern and 9:30 a.m. Pacific for the Winners Find a Way show. Always join us. You can find us at leadershipity.com and look for Ask Me Anything every Friday at 2:00. Look forward to the next time, Finnian. Great to see you.